Today I'm going to be talking about Tainted Grail, Kings of Ruin, the new game from Awakened Realms that plays 1 to 4 players. This is a sequel to the wildly popular Tainted Grail, Fall of Avalon, a game that came out a few years ago. This is an update. They've updated the rules a bit to be what they're calling a 2.0 version. I'd call it probably more of a 1.5. But we'll talk about later about how I feel about the changes to the game. And this is, of course, a new campaign, new story, everything to the game. So, otherwise this is, a second game in the Tainted Grail system. I want to make a disclaimer here. I have not been able to play very far into this version of the game. Unfortunately, my copy was not packed correctly, and I'm missing most of the encounter cards, all the blue ones, and many of the other ones. So I couldn't play too much of the game. I did get through the tutorial and some of the first chapter, so I feel I played it enough to get a feel for how it's different from the original and kind of get an idea of how the story is going in this one. I did play a lot of the original Tainted Grail, but I did never finished that campaign either. I'm going to finish that probably fully before I come back to this one. But I did want to originally plan on playing this one enough to have a really thorough review of this version of the game. But unfortunately, I can't do that. And I have contacted the support. They are sending me out replacement cards, but they're not going to be here for probably over a month. So I really want to get this review out sooner. So unfortunately, that's where it's at. So that's what I'll have to go with. So I'll start with the components. The components to this are quite similar. So if you played the original one, it's all going to be fairly familiar to you. There are more minis in the base version of this. I don't get the extra minis. I don't paint minis, so I tend to not get them, and I don't mind having standees. The original version just had a few minis. It had the minions and the characters, and then I think a monster. And that was it. And then the guardians that would kind of roam the board were just cards, which was kind of annoying. In this one, we've got more minis, and they've actually included standees this time. And the standees are quite good. They're a lot better than some of their more recent games. I know in the past I've complained that their standees are kind of subpar. These ones there's nicer art on them. They look a little better than the other ones. I still wish they would move to an acrylic or offer an acrylic standee, but it's nice to actually have standees in this one, so you don't have the the cards as guardians. I just thought that was kind of annoying. That didn't quite fit the game. They're kind of fiddly that way. So that's an improvement over the original. The otherwise, a lot of the components are the same. We still have the card-based terrain, the same kind of tarot-sized card terrain. That the one change they made in this component is, in the original game, they had kind of the terrain on one side, and then when you flipped on the other, it had this kind of some of the story and detail about the location. They decided that was redundant, and so now we have the weirdness on the other side. So the tiles will come in with the weirdness if they're not connected to one of these waystones here, and so you have to activate a waystone adjacent to these to flip them to their clear side or non-weird form side. And so that's the difference there with that one. So all the cards will have a weird form side and a non-weird weird sign. So that's another change. I think that's an improvement. That's cooler. You didn't really use the other sides. I never used. I think the first couple you flipped over, and then all the descriptions are in the scenario book. So it didn't make sense to flip the card. The combat, you still have your combat and diplomacy decks. So those are the same. They have replaced the skill cards with tokens. I do mostly like these. These are nice. They kind of slot into your player board, and they have a spot to put a cube. So that's nice. But the one thing I don't like about them is they're supposed to match the attribute that they go in, and they've got this kind of art on here that it's really, for some of the attributes, it's hard to figure out which attribute they belong to. At first I thought they were just related to the character, because they are related to the character, so each character will have their own set of these, but they're special for each attribute. and it's not very clear on there. So if I have a complaint about the components, that's probably one of the minor ones. Otherwise, the slider's the same. The player boards look the same as the original. It's the same 2-layer player board. Cubes are the same as the original. They do have these new time counters, so that's a little bit different here. When you move into some locations and do the location action, they get a time counter. So some of the actions you can only trigger them once every day or two or a couple days. So that's another new component that's in there. And they also have a component. I don't have it on the table here, but they have a component to mark quests. It's another little kind of small plastic component, and they have a slider for the diplomacy cards. I'm not quite sure how I feel about that. At first, I thought, oh, cool, you got a slider to track how you're doing with the diplomacy when you're doing diplomacy turns, but it doesn't really stay on the card well. I tried it. You can see it in my playthrough. I tried it a bit. It's kind of fiddly. I probably just use a cube like in the original game. Yeah, and it still has the same dice. There is a timer die now that's used to time the duration of the diplomacy. So there's one extra die over the other one. But otherwise, yeah, that's it. I do want to say the exploration journal is massive in this version of the game, so it looks like there's quite a bit of story in here. And then there's for the Kickstarter, there's another lost something or other storybook. So there's another storybook for the Kickstarter extras. It's much thinner than this, but this one's pretty huge. And of course, they're going to have an app with all that coming up. Okay, mechanics in this game, same as the original. So it's mostly you're just exploring around, you're progressing your characters, leveling stuff up, getting skills, building your decks. So there's a little deck building in here, more kind of deck replacement. So you can replace cards with ones from like more advanced ones, and then you always have to have at least 10 cards in your deck, and you can swap them in and out. Once you get a bigger pool of cards, you can decide which ones you want to play with for the day. And of course, there's ones for diplomacy and ones for combat. So that all works pretty much the same. Even though they've changed this to a token, the skills are basically work the same as they did in the original game. And then they have the combat and the diplomacy are mostly the same. So combat is exactly the same, where you're trying to chain your cards together to get the cubes on the monster and get their health and kill the monster. That all works the same as the original game. And I still really enjoy that. I think this and probably why they didn't change it, because they didn't need to fix that. The combat worked really well. I really like the card chaining there and how it works. But they did make some changes to the diplomacy. So the diplomacy is similar to the combat, and you chain your cards together. But with the diplomacy, you're always trying to move a cube towards a green space and keep it from falling to the red space. And in the original game, you had to do 1 or 2 levels of that. So you'd accomplish it, and it would trigger the second level. You move to the second level, and you reset back to the middle and try to get it back up to green again. They've changed that now. Instead of that level kind of thing, they've introduced a die that tracks timing, and now you're doing the same thing. You're trying to push that cube up to green, but there's a time limit, and when the time runs out, wherever that cube is how it resolves. So if it's in the green, it resolves as a success. If it's in kind of like between the red and the green, there's a different kind of outcome, and if it's in the red, there's a different outcome. So that's a neat change. I think I like that change better, because diplomacy tended to go really long sometimes. You would just kind of stall in the original game, and it would go pretty long. And this one, you've got that set time, so you got to get it done in a set time, and there's kind of 3 outcomes, kind of like a neutral outcome. So I like that change. I think that makes it a bit more interesting. But otherwise, the card chaining works the same. Like how the diplomacy works, how the symbols trigger, all that's the same as the original game. Just that one tweak. Yeah, so that's pretty much all I have to say about the mechanics for this one. So start with things I don't like. I think for this one, there's a lot less I don't like from playing the little bit I have. Of course, I'm not going to comment on the story at all, beyond the fact that the writing is still quite good for this one. But I've not progressed through the story at all, so I have no comments on how that what the story's like. But the campaign system is the same, so I'll comment on that later. Um, the the difficulty still seems to be quite high. So spoiler alert, if you go watch my run through of this, um, you'll see that I died during the first day of the game fighting the training monster, and I got whooped. I didn't even get close to beating it. It cleaned me out pretty quickly. So, and I was hoping this game in the original Tainted Grail, one of the issues with that game was the difficulty scaling wasn't very good. I play this game mostly solo. I've never actually played this one multiplayer. I do tend to play campaign games solo because it's hard to because my group only meets once every 2 weeks, and we tend to like to play different games. So to play something like this all the way through, would take like a year practically. So I generally tend to play these games solo. So and I had a very difficult time trying to figure out how to play the original Tainted Grail solo. I finally ended up playing on the story mode with two-handed was the best way. So I believe the story mode in the original was you just counted whenever you had to pay resources, you counted the player count -1, basically, and that made it a bit easier. And I found that was a sweet spot for Tainted Grail. So I was playing, and that unfortunately the reason I haven't finished that campaign is because I restarted it about 3 times before I figured that out. And I was hoping with this one that I could just play a true solo and just play like I picked this Osborne character, and I was hoping I could just play with this character all the way through without having to two-hand or anything like that. Of course, I haven't played enough of this to know that for sure, but I've already had to reset. Like I played, through the run through. Didn't even make it through the first day, and I've already got to reset. And so it kind of looks like to me, playing with just one character, at least with this character, might not be possible. Now, it might be that you can play True Soul with specific characters, because for the tutorial they specify a specific character for that. That's easier to use. That's a more balanced character. And so that character might be the one you want to use for if you want to play a true solo. But I mean, this character was really interesting to me. I really wanted to play him, but he seems to be really terrible at combat, but very good at diplomacy. So maybe it's just a matter of learning how to play him properly. He does have things that allow him to avoid combat. He gets these trinkets. Is one of his special abilities. He pays 2 actions, and he can take a smoke bomb, a snare, or a firebomb, and those things actually kind of help him get food and avoid combat. So to me, that's kind of hinting at me that I don't want to hunt. I want to get my snare to get food. I don't want to fight things. I want to use my smoke bomb to avoid things. But I don't know. Like I don't know this story. I haven't been too far into the story, so is that a valid strategy to avoid fighting at all? Can you get away with that? Until maybe you only have to do it until you upgrade. Like as you can see, his stats here very low on the combat side and very high on the diplomacy side. So maybe if I upgrade a little bit in the combat, maybe that will help even him out a little bit. Yeah, who knows? But yeah, so it seems like it's still a game for skilled players, that you might have to reset a couple times. I don't know how I feel about that. I'd rather they ramp up the difficulty slowly with all the characters until you're into the game, and then maybe start hitting hard. But the fact that I died against that trading character, I mean, maybe I got a really bad draw or something. But yeah, so that would probably be still on my dislike. The difficulty curve seems to be still a little bit off. But we'll see. Maybe if I get more plays, it'll even out. So what do I like about this game? Well, the original game, that's the story, was just amazing. Like I'm not through the whole story, but what I played is just amazing. The branching paths, the different things you can do, the fact that it's kind of open world, you can take any path you want, and it kind of guides you in certain areas, but there's choices to make, and the writing is top notch, and that carries over to here. Even though I haven't played this very much, the writing that's in here I can already tell is just equivalent to the first game. Very interesting story, world. The writing is very good. Yeah, this is a world I want to explore some more. It's really interesting. Um, the the new mechanic with the waystones over the menhirs. This is much better than the menhirs. The menhirs are pretty annoying in the original game because you would spend a bunch of resources to get them on the map to keep the map open. Um, and in Tainted Grail, the map would disappear when the menhirs went out, and they would time down. So you had to all constantly move around, keep them lit, and so you keep the portion of the board you were working on lit, and that was kind of annoying to have to run back and forth constantly and get resources and keep those things lit. Here, that you just put them on the map and they stay there. There's no timing down mechanic. Now they can get taken out by guardians. It says that in the rules, so I'm sure there's things that will take them out periodically, but there's not a timer that you have to worry about, and it's more about moving them around to where you need them because there's only 3. And in this game, they can only keep 4 locations out of weirdness. In the original, the menhir would keep the 9 card section open. So they've reduced kind of the footprint of what they keep open, but they don't time down, and they go in the corners here. And I guess there's only certain places that you can see this card doesn't have. There's no corner over here to keep this one open, so you've got to put one up here. So that's kind of leading you where you can go. Of course, you can go into the weirdness, but you'll take damage and a sanity to do that. Yeah, I really like this change. This is one of the biggest changes in the game, and really good change. They've addressed probably the main issue that most people had playing this game with this mechanic here. The other big change is the food. In the original game, if you didn't eat, you got punished for not having food. You had to have food every day. In this one, you don't have to have food all the time. You do get a bonus if you eat food. You can heal and reduce your sanity and get an extra action, but you don't have to eat. So they've taken away some of that difficulty there. And of course, the story mode. If you want to play in story mode, it's a little easier even than the original. I think in story mode, you don't have this. You take this thing right out, so your action, even as you get damaged, you don't lose actions. I don't think I'm going to play the story mode. I'm going to try the regular mode. It looks like with the changes they made, it's less of a grind, and it'll be a lot better. So yeah, if you didn't like Tainted Grail for those things, they've taken those out and streamlined that, so that would make your experience much better. So those are great changes. I do like of course I said that already. I do like the change to the diplomacy. I've always liked I know some people don't like the combat diplomacy part of the game. I do really like the chain card mechanic. I like the fighting and the diplomacy. I like the fact that there's 2 things you can go for. You can get can be good in diplomacy or combat, and kind of gesture decks that way. And I do find those systems both interesting. I do like the card chaining, and I think it's fun. And I've always liked the action system in this. How you use the actions to do that, and you have the decision about when you get when you to push yourself to exhaustion, and you get fewer actions back. But sometimes you got to do that. That's also a little easier in this game. It used to be the last 2 actions push you to exhaustion. Now it's only the last one, so they've made that a little easier too. Yeah, well, that's pretty much all I have to say about this game. As far as a early rating goes, I mean, the original Tainted Grail for me was an 8. I think this one is better. They've taken out the things I didn't like about the original game, and they've improved all those aspects to make it a much better experience. So for now, I would say my new rating for this one would probably be about an 8.5. And like I said, this is a 1.5, not a 2.0 in my opinion. The bones, the framework is mostly 90% there. I think they've just made some tweaks. It's not a wholesale change. They've made some tweaks to streamline the game and improve it based on the criticisms that people gave the game. Thanks for watching. Until next time, I'm Jim.